Hi, this is Michael from The Jaded Truth. One of the most abused verses in the charismatic church is Romans 4:17. You have probably heard it said like this: call those things that are not as though they are. And usually it gets preached like this: speak your healing, speak your promotion, speak your breakthrough, speak your bank account full. Don't say what you see, say what you want to see. And listen, I get why that sounds good, why that sounds spiritual or amazing. Especially if you're sitting there and you're tired and you're sick, you're discouraged, or even hiding in the bathroom at work just trying to get 5 minutes of peace. That kind of teaching sounds powerful. It sounds like hope. But the question is not, does it sound good? The question is that what the text actually says? The answer is no. That is not what Romans 4:17 is teaching. In a lot of charismatic circles, this verse gets turned into a formula. They teach your words have creative power. That if you speak something with enough faith, and reality has to obey. That is where you get phrases like your words create your reality. Declare until you see it. Don't speak negative, you'll cancel your blessing. And historically, this kind of teaching grew heavily through the word of faith and positive confession movement. Faith started being treated like a spiritual force. Words became a way for you to release that force. So now instead of trusting God, you are trying to manage reality with your mouth. And I'm not going to say it plainly, or I'm just going to say it plainly. That is not a biblical faith. And that is manifestation with a church outfit on it. And the reason it sells so well is because it gives us control. It tells me I can declare my dream life. I can speak money. I can speak health. I can speak wealth. I can speak promotion. I can speak favor. But at some point we have to ask, are we following God? Or are we just trying to use God as the power source from our own desires? Because those are not the same thing. And danger is real. When this teaching fails, and it will fail, people usually do not blame the teaching. They blame the wounded believer. You didn't have enough faith. You spoke doubt. You let negativity in. You canceled your miracle. So now somebody is sick, grieving, struggling, broke, and instead of being comforted, they get accused. That don't sound very good. That is not shepherding. That is spiritual pressure disguised as faith. So let's read the verse in its entirety. Romans 4:17 in the New American Standard Bible. It says, as it is written, a father of many nations have I made you, in the presence of him who he believed, that is, God, who gives life to the dead and calls into being things that do not exist. Now let's slow that down. Listen to what Paul says. Who gives life to the dead? God. Who calls into being things that do not exist? God. Not Abraham, not the preacher, not you, not me. God. Paul is not saying Abraham spoke Isaac into existence. Paul is saying Abraham trusted the God who could do that, do what Abraham could not do. That is the whole point of Romans 4. But Paul is talking about justification by faith. He is showing that Abraham was counted righteous because he believed in God. Abraham had a promise from God, but everything he could see said it was impossible. He was old. Sarah was barren. Their bodies were as good as dead when it came to having children. And here's what I love about the passage. Abraham did not deny reality. Romans 4:19 says he contemplated his own body, now as good as dead. That means biblical faith is not pretending the problem is not real or it doesn't exist. Faith is not saying I'm not sick when you are sick. Faith is not saying I'm struggling when you are struggling. Faith is not standing in front of the empty pantry saying this pantry is full. Like God is impressed by pretending. Biblical faith looks at reality honestly and still says God is trustworthy. That is different. That is deeper. That is faith. Romans 4:17 is not about Abraham creating reality with his words. It's about Abraham trusting that God, who creates, raises, fulfills, and keeps his promises. Abraham's faith did not create a promise or create the promise. Abraham's faith trusted God who made the promise. And that distinction matters because when churches turn this into speak your reality, they are changing the subject. Paul is not teaching manifestation. Paul is teaching trust. And honestly, trusting God is harder. Declaring outcomes is easy. Trusting God means I may not control the timeline. It may not control the method. I may not get the answer the way I wanted it. But God is still in control. But I still trust his character. So here is the jaded truth. Romans 4:17 is not about your ability to manifest your future. It's about God's ability to fulfill his promise. You are not Abraham calling things into existence. You are Abraham looking into an impossible situation and saying, God is still faithful. And that should actually comfort us because the promise depends on my words. Because if the promise depends on my words, my confidence, my volume, or my ability to declare everything perfectly, I'm in trouble. But if the promise depends on God's character, God's power, and God's faithfulness, then I can rest. So pray boldly, speak truth, trust deeply, but stop letting people turn your faith into a formula. You are not the creator, you are the believer. And real faith does not create reality. Real faith trusts God when reality looks impossible. All right.